I never thought my own family would turn on me. Not like this. Not after everything I had sacrificed for them. But maybe that's the problem. When people get used to leaning on you, they forget you have a breaking point. They start to believe that you owe them, that your sacrifices are just part of the deal. My name is Alex and I'm 26 years old. For the past 8 years, I've been the one holding my family together. Not that they ever acknowledged it. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. My father Marcus used to work in construction, and my mother Rachel took part-time bookkeeping jobs to make ends meet. It was tight, but we managed. But things changed in 2017 when my father injured his back at work. He had to quit waiting for disability checks that never seemed to come. My mother tried to pick up the slack, taking on more hours, but it was never enough. That's when I stepped in. At 18, I got my first job. I started helping out, a little here, a little there. Covering the electric bill one month, groceries the next. It felt right at the time. I told myself this is what family does, but over the years that little help turned into a full-time financial commitment. By 21, I was paying almost everything. Rent, utilities, internet, even my younger sister Lily's school expenses. My older brother Matt, who was 29 and still living at home, never chipped in. Not a single cent. If anything, he made fun of me for being so responsible. He acted like my efforts were some kind of joke, as if my sacrifices made me weak. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that once my dad got his disability checks or my mom found a better job, things would go back to normal. But that day never came. And somewhere along the way, I stopped believing it ever would. Then came Christmas Eve. We were all gathered around the table. My parents, my brother, my 17-year-old sister Lily and me. The dinner was the same as always. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole. My mom, despite the financial strain, insisted on keeping holiday traditions alive. For the first half of the meal, everything felt normal. My dad was drinking like usual. My brother was glued to his phone, occasionally throwing out a sarcastic comment whenever my mom tried to spark a real conversation. Lily was scrolling through social media, her face lit by the blue glow of her phone. Just another family holiday. But somewhere between passing the stuffing and my dad pouring himself another glass of whiskey, the conversation took a turn I never expected. "You know," my dad said, leaning back in his chair, his words slurred but his tone sharper than ever, "Alex has been living here rent-free for years now." I froze. My fork hovered in midair halfway to my mouth. I felt my face flush with a mix of shock and anger. "What?" My mom nodded as if this was something they had discussed before. "We've been talking, honey. You're 26 now. It's time you moved out and started your own life." For a second, I couldn't even process what I was hearing. My older brother, the same one who had never contributed a dime, snorted from across the table. "Dude, you're way too old to still be living at home." I set my fork down carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. "I pay to live here," I said slowly. "I cover the rent, the utilities, the internet, groceries, and half of Lily's school expenses, and you're calling me a freeloader." My dad waved a hand dismissively. "That's not the point. A man your age shouldn't be living with his parents." I let out a short, humorless laugh. I felt my chest tighten, the walls around me suddenly closing in. They really think I'm the problem here. My mom sighed, shaking her head as if I was being unreasonable. "We're not saying you don't help, Alex, but it's time for you to be independent. Your father and I think it's for the best." I looked at her, my mind racing, the weight of years of sacrifice suddenly feeling like a noose around my neck. For who I thought? For them. They had grown so used to me paying for everything, carrying their burdens, that it hadn't even crossed their minds what would happen if I left. For years, I had put my own future, my own dreams on hold so they could have a roof over their heads, and now they were tossing me out like I was the problem. I felt my stomach twist, not with sadness, not even with anger, just disbelief. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. "All right," I said finally. "If that's what you want." My mom's expression softened as if she thought I was finally seeing reason. "I know it's scary, sweetie, but this will be good for you. We can even help you look for a place." I almost laughed. Help me! They hadn't helped me with anything in years. They had taken, and now they wanted to help me leave. I just nodded. "I'll start packing tomorrow." For the first time that night, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. She hadn't expected me to agree so quickly. But I was done. Done being their financial safety net, their convenient excuse for not facing reality. I was finally ready to choose myself. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Not because I wanted to, but because I had barely slept. My dad's words kept echoing in my head, replaying on a loop. "Living here rent-free. Time to be independent. You're the problem." I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the bare wall in front of me. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. It hit me that this place, the house I had helped keep running for years, no longer felt like a home. I pulled out a few duffel bags from my closet. Clothes first, the essentials. Then my work laptop, important documents, anything valuable I didn't want to leave behind. I didn't own much. Most of the furniture belonged to my parents anyway. I had always put off getting my own place because I thought they needed me. Turns out they just needed my money. By noon, I was nearly done. I was shoving the last of my things into a bag when I heard a soft knock on my door. It was Lily standing in the doorway, arms crossed, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "You're really leaving?" she asked, her voice small. I zipped my bag shut, avoiding her eyes. That's what they wanted. She bit her lip, looking down at the floor. "Mom said you'd calm down." I let out a short, bitter laugh. She actually thinks this is me overreacting. Lily didn't respond. She just stood there, unsure of what to say. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of guilt. She was still a kid, stuck under the same roof, dealing with the same parents. She had no real say in any of this. But I couldn't stay for her. I had to choose myself for once. "Look," I said, my tone softening a bit. "I'm not mad at you, okay? But I'm not staying where I'm not wanted." She nodded, but she looked away quickly, like she didn't want me to see whatever emotion was on her face. Then, without another word, she turned and walked off, her footsteps light and quick as she disappeared down the hall. I sighed and grabbed my bags. Time to go. As I reached the front door, I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. I had no clear plan. Just a few bags, a decent savings account, and a head full of bitter memories. But I knew one thing for sure. I was done being their crutch. I stepped into the living room, hoping to slip out quietly, but my mom caught me. She walked in from the kitchen, her eyes going wide when she saw my bags. "You're really leaving now?" she asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and something that almost sounded like worry. I looked at her, trying to keep my expression neutral. "You told me to." She frowned, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. "Well, I thought you'd take a little more time to figure things out." I shook my head. "No need. I already have a place I can stay." That wasn't entirely true. I had a few options, crashing with a friend, getting a short-term rental, but I'd figure it out. What I wasn't going to do was stand here and let her guilt trip me into staying longer. Just as I reached for the doorknob, my dad walked into the room, scratching his stomach like this was just another lazy afternoon. "So you're really doing this, huh?" he said, his tone more annoyed than surprised. I didn't bother answering. I just pushed the door open. But then my mom spoke again, and her words made me stop in my tracks. "Alex, before you go, we need to talk about the bills." I froze, my hand still on the doorknob. I turned back slowly, my mind struggling to process what I had just heard. "What?" "Well," she said, her tone cautious, as if she were talking to a particularly slow child. "I know you're moving out, but obviously we still need help with rent and utilities. We were thinking you could keep sending some money, at least for a little while." I just stared at her, my mouth hanging open. I must have misheard. "You're kidding." She shook her head, her expression earnest. "No, I'm serious. We can't afford everything on our own right now, and you've been helping for so long. It wouldn't be that different. You'd just be living somewhere else." I felt my fists clench at my sides. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had no problem throwing me out, telling me to be independent, but the second they realized that also meant losing my financial support, suddenly they wanted to negotiate. "No," I said firmly, my voice sharper than I intended. My dad's face twisted in annoyance. "Oh, come on, Alex, don't be selfish. We took care of you for years. Now it's your turn to help us." I felt my jaw tighten, my pulse pounding in my ears. Selfish. They were calling me selfish after all the years I had sacrificed for them. I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I'm not paying for anything anymore. You made it clear I'm not part of this household, so I'm done." Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. My mom blinked as if she couldn't believe what I had just said. My dad just crossed his arms, his jaw set in a hard line. "Wow," he said finally, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's how you repay us, huh?" I almost laughed. I felt a strange, twisted sense of freedom in that moment. They had shown their true colors, and for once I had nothing left to give. Without another word, I turned and walked out the door, letting it swing shut behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. As I reached my car, I felt the cold winter air sting my cheeks, but for the first time in years, I felt light, free. I had no idea what came next, but whatever it was, at least it would be mine. The first night I crashed at my friend Jason's place. He didn't ask many questions, just handed me a blanket and said, "Make yourself at home, man." I tried to relax, to let the weight of the day slip off my shoulders, but my mind wouldn't quiet down. I lay there on the lumpy couch staring at the ceiling, my thoughts bouncing between anger and disbelief. How did it come to this? I had been their rock for years, the one holding everything together, and they just tossed me aside like I was the problem, like I was the burden. The next morning I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of Jason clinking dishes in the kitchen. I dragged myself off the couch, my back stiff and my head throbbing from the lack of sleep. "Morning," he said, sliding a mug of black coffee across the counter. "Thanks," I muttered, taking a long sip. Jason leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. "So, what's your plan?" I took a deep breath, the bitter coffee sharp on my tongue. "Find a place, get my stuff together, and move on, I guess." He nodded, a slight frown creasing his brow. "You know you can stay here as long as you need, right?" I forced a small smile. "Appreciate it, but I can't keep living off people. I need my own space." After a quick shower and a change of clothes, I started scrolling through rental listings on my phone. It was a harsh reality check. Rent prices had skyrocketed in the past few years, and the thought of covering all my own bills without the cushion of my family's house felt overwhelming. But I had made my decision. There was no going back. By the end of the day, I had lined up a few viewings. I wanted something small, something that felt like mine even if it wasn't much. I needed a fresh start, a place where I could breathe without feeling the weight of someone else's expectations. A few days later, I found it. A tiny one-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city. It wasn't anything special. The floors creaked, the cabinets were old, and the paint was chipped. But it had big windows that let in plenty of sunlight and a view of the skyline. It felt free. I signed the lease without hesitation. It was the first major decision I had made in years without anyone else's opinion weighing me down. It felt good, liberating even. Moving in was a different story. I didn't have much to bring, just the clothes and essentials I had thrown into my bags that morning. The place felt empty, echoing with every step I took, but it was mine. That first night, I sat on the floor of my unfurnished living room, eating takeout straight from the container, the city lights flickering through the window. For the first time in a long while, I felt something close to peace. But reality hit soon enough. The first round of bills arrived: rent, electricity, internet, all those things I used to cover for my family. Now they were my responsibility alone. I tightened my budget, cut back on the small luxuries I had taken for granted, and started focusing on my job more than ever. I threw myself into work, taking on extra hours, pushing for promotions, and slowly I started to see the balance in my bank account stabilize. It felt like I was finally building something for myself without the constant drain of my family's needs. But then the calls started. At first it was just my mom, her name flashing on my screen every few days. I ignored them, letting them go to voicemail, my chest tightening each time her voice crackled through the messages. "Alex, honey, we haven't heard from you. Just checking in." A few days later, another one. "We're worried about you. Call us when you get a chance." And then the tone shifted. Less worried, more demanding. "Alex, we need to talk about the bills. You know we can't handle this on our own. Please call us back." I felt my jaw clench every time I heard her voice. They still didn't get it. They still thought I owed them. That I was just a walking ATM, a safety net they could fall back on whenever they hit a rough patch. One night, I came home to a dozen missed calls from my dad. I stared at my phone, my thumb hovering over the call button, but I couldn't bring myself to hit it. I had nothing left to say to them. Then one Saturday morning, there was a knock at my door. I froze my coffee halfway to my lips. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I hadn't given my new address to my parents. I crept over to the door and peered through the peephole. My stomach dropped. It was my mom and dad standing side by side on my doorstep, their faces tight with anger and desperation. I took a deep breath, feeling my pulse quicken. I had a choice. I could ignore them, pretend I wasn't home, or I could face them, confront the people who had pushed me to this point. I unlocked the door slowly, the old hinges creaking as it swung open. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. My dad crossed his arms, his jaw set, his eyes hard. "We need to talk." I leaned against the doorframe, blocking their way, my heart pounding. "About what?" My mom stepped forward, her hands wringing nervously. "Alex, this is ridiculous. We're family. You can't just cut us off like this." I felt my grip tighten on the doorframe, my knuckles turning white. "Like you cut me off. Like you threw me out of my own home and then had the nerve to ask me to keep paying your bills." Silence. My dad's face flushed red, his jaw clenching. "You owe us," he snapped, his voice rising. "We raised you, fed you, took care of you for years. You don't just walk away from family." I felt something snap inside me, a final thread of patience breaking. I straightened up, meeting his glare head on. "I don't owe you anything," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I gave you everything I had and you threw it back in my face. I'm done." I watched their faces crumble, the reality of my words sinking in. I didn't wait for their response. I stepped back and shut the door firmly, the sound of the lock clicking into place echoing through my empty apartment. I stood there for a moment, my heart racing, my breaths coming in short, sharp bursts, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. The days that followed felt surreal. I had cut the final cord, closed the door, literally, on the people who had held me back for years. I should have felt relieved, free, and in some ways I did. But the silence that settled over my small apartment felt heavy, like a storm that had passed but left the air thick and suffocating. For the first time in years, I had no one demanding my attention, no one pulling at the threads of my sanity. It felt strange, unsettling even to have that kind of quiet. I tried to throw myself into work, burying my thoughts under deadlines and spreadsheets. I stayed late at the office, volunteered for projects I had once avoided, and took every opportunity to prove my worth. I was determined to build a life that didn't revolve around the needs of others. But the calls didn't stop. My mom switched tactics, moving from angry voicemails to tearful messages, her voice cracking as she pleaded for me to come back to just talk things over. "Alex, please. Your father didn't mean what he said. We were upset. We miss you." I deleted each message without a second thought, my jaw tightening every time her number flashed on my screen. Then came the text messages, short, desperate, filled with guilt and manipulation. "Please come home. We can work this out. We're family. Don't turn your back on us." I never replied. But the final straw came one Friday evening, just as I was closing my laptop after a long, exhausting day at work. My phone buzzed on the corner of my desk. I glanced at the screen, my stomach twisting as I recognized the number. It was my brother Matt, the one who had never worked a day in his life, the one who had mocked me for years for being too responsible. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, letting it go to voicemail like all the others. But a strange curiosity got the better of me. I swiped to answer, pressing the phone to my ear. "Hello." There was a pause on the other end, a heavy, awkward silence. Then his voice crackled through the line, sharp and irritated. "Alex, what the hell is wrong with you?" I felt my grip on the phone tighten. I hadn't heard his voice in weeks, and yet the anger in his tone felt as familiar as ever. "What do you want, Matt?" I replied, my voice cold. "What do I want?" He snapped, his words coming out in a harsh burst. "I want to know why you're being such a selfish jerk. Mom and Dad are struggling, and you're just sitting there in your fancy little apartment pretending you don't owe them anything." I closed my eyes, my jaw clenching so hard I thought my teeth might crack. "Here we go again." "I don't owe them anything," I said, slowly, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I carried them for years. I paid the bills. I put my own life on hold for them, and they threw me out like I was the problem. So don't call me selfish." Matt let out a bitter laugh, the sound sharp and cutting through the line. "Oh, come on, Alex. You act like you're some kind of martyr, like we should all bow down and thank you for throwing a few bucks our way." I felt my pulse quicken, a hot, sharp anger rising in my chest. "A few bucks? I paid for everything, Matt. Rent, utilities, groceries, Lily's school fees, all of it. And what did you do? You sat on your ass living rent-free, acting like you were better than me." Silence. For a moment, I thought he might actually hang up, but then he spoke, his voice lower, more controlled. "Look, I get it. You're pissed. But this is family we're talking about. You don't just walk away from family." I felt a bitter smile twist my lips. Family. That word had lost its meaning a long time ago. "I didn't walk away," I said, my voice cold. "They pushed me out. They made it clear I wasn't welcome. And now that they're realizing what that means, they want me back." "No, Matt. I'm done." He let out a long, frustrated sigh, his tone shifting to something almost desperate. "So that's it? You're just gonna let them struggle? You're really that heartless?" I felt my fists clench at my sides, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. "I'm not heartless. I'm just done being their doormat. I'm done being the one they lean on while you sit back and do nothing." There was a long silence, the kind that stretched on so long it became physically uncomfortable. "You're going to regret this," he said finally, his voice dripping with bitterness. "One day you'll realize how wrong you are." I almost laughed. I had been living in regret for years, regretting every dollar, every second of my time I had poured into a family that saw me as nothing but a walking ATM. "Goodbye, Matt," I said, my voice steady, my heart strangely calm. "Don't call me again." I ended the call, my hand shaking as I tossed my phone onto the couch. My pulse was racing, my head throbbing, but I felt a strange, powerful sense of relief. I had faced them, I had stood my ground, and I hadn't broken. That night I sat by the window, staring out at the city lights, my mind a chaotic mess of anger, relief, and a dull, aching sadness. But beneath it all there was something else. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. For once I had chosen myself. And I wasn't going to apologize for it. The weeks that followed felt like waking up from a long, exhausting dream. I started to settle into a routine. Work, gym, grocery runs, quiet evenings in my small apartment. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every bill I paid, every piece of furniture I bought, every moment of peace I felt, it all belonged to me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own life. But as the days turned into weeks, the silence grew heavier. I hadn't heard from my parents since that last confrontation, and I wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse. Part of me expected them to show up again, pounding on my door, demanding that I do my part. But they didn't. Instead, I started hearing things through the grapevine. Jason's mom still talked to my mother occasionally, and bits and pieces of their struggles trickled back to me. My dad had apparently tried to pick up odd jobs here and there, but his back injury made physical labor nearly impossible. My mom was working longer hours trying to keep up with the mounting bills. Even Matt, the golden child, had been forced to find a job. Something part-time, but still a far cry from the lazy, comfortable life he had grown so accustomed to. Lily had to drop her after-school programs, cutting back on activities she had always taken for granted. I felt a pang of guilt when I heard that. She was the only one I genuinely felt bad about leaving behind. She was still a kid trapped in a situation she didn't choose. But I reminded myself that I had to stop being everyone's savior. I had to put myself first for once. One day as I was heading out to grab lunch, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated for a moment, my thumb hovering over the screen. I had made a habit of ignoring unknown numbers lately, but something made me swipe to answer. Hello? There was a long pause on the other end, the kind of silence that makes your heart skip a beat. Then a familiar voice crackled through the line. Alex, it's Lily. I felt my heart tighten. I hadn't spoken to her since the day I moved out, when she had hovered in my doorway, her eyes downcast, her voice small. Lily, I said, leaning against the wall of my apartment, my mind racing. What's going on? Are you okay? She hesitated, her breath shaky. Yeah, I'm fine. I wanted to talk to you. I glanced at my watch, then sank down onto the edge of my couch. Okay, what's up? There was another long pause, and I could almost picture her sitting alone in her room, twisting her fingers nervously like she always did when she was scared. I miss you, she said, her voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. I felt a lump form in my throat. I hadn't expected that. I miss you too, Lily. I replied, my voice softer than I intended. But you know why I had to leave. She sniffed a faint trembling sound that cut straight through me. I know, it's hard here without you. Everything's falling apart. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, my head spinning. I had prepared myself for a lot of things when I walked out of that house, but not this. Not the quiet, painful reminder that my absence had left a void. I'm sorry, Lily, I said, my voice tight. I really am. But I can't go back. I can't keep carrying everyone. I have to live my own life. She let out a shaky breath, and for a moment I thought she might hang up. But then she spoke again, her voice steadier this time. I understand. I wanted you to know that I'm proud of you. For standing up for yourself. I felt my heart clench, a strange mix of pride and heartbreak flooding my chest. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear those words. Thank you, Lily. I whispered, my voice barely more than a breath. That means a lot. There was a long silence, the kind that felt more like a shared understanding than an uncomfortable pause. I have to go, she said finally, her voice small again. But take care of yourself, okay? You too, I replied, my throat tight. Call me if you ever need anything. I will, she said, and then the line went dead, the quiet hum of the disconnected call echoing in my ear. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand, my mind a chaotic swirl of emotions. I had chosen this freedom, this independence, and I didn't regret it. But I hadn't expected it to come with such a sharp, lingering sense of loss. A few days later, I got a text from Jason. Hey man, heard your folks are struggling. Don't let it get to you. You did the right thing. I smiled a small bitter smile as I typed back a quick thanks. I knew I had done the right thing. I had finally taken control of my own life, broken free from the chains that had held me down for so long, but it still hurt. As I stood by my window that night staring out at the city lights, I felt a strange quiet sense of peace. I had sacrificed years of my life for a family that had never truly appreciated me. I had given them everything, and they had pushed me away the moment I asked for a little respect. But now I had nothing left to give. And for the first time in my life, that felt like a victory. I took a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill my lungs, the tightness in my chest slowly unraveling. I had chosen myself. And for once, that was enough. Story 2. I never imagined that my own anniversary party would become the battleground for a family power struggle. 7 years into my marriage with Daniel, I thought I'd seen the worst of his mother Margaret. But nothing prepared me for the events that unfolded. Margaret had always been a formidable presence, elegant, poised, and unapologetically controlling. From the moment I joined the Thompson family, I was made to feel like an outsider. My modest background and career in nonprofit work didn't align with their expectations. During a family dinner, Margaret announced with a gleam in her eye, "I have a special surprise planned for your anniversary party next month." The room fell silent. Daniel, ever the peacemaker, gently reminded her we agreed on no surprises this year. Margaret waved off his concern, insisting, "Oh, it's just a little something to make the evening memorable." I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Later, my best friend and confidant Rachel pulled me aside. "She's up to something," she warned. I nodded, revealing that I'd been working on a project of my own, a tech startup that had recently gained traction. "I'm planning to announce the acquisition of Thompson Enterprises at the party," I confided. Rachel's eyes widened. "You're buying the family company?" I nodded. "It's time Margaret learns that I won't be sidelined." In the weeks leading up to the party, I finalized the acquisition through a shell company ensuring discretion. Margaret remained oblivious, engrossed in her own plans. She even went so far as to invite Daniel's childhood friend Emily, a successful lawyer with the pedigree Margaret admired. The implication was clear. The day before the party, I met with our family attorney, Mr. Harris, to sign the final documents. He hesitated, reminding me of the potential fallout, but I was resolute. "This is about more than business," I explained. "It's about reclaiming my place in this family." As the party approached, tensions mounted. Margaret's behavior grew increasingly erratic, and Daniel seemed caught in the middle. I could only hope that when the truth came out, he would stand by me. The morning of the anniversary party, I woke up early. The sky outside our penthouse was gray, not stormy but heavy, like it knew something was coming. I stood by the window with my coffee, watching the city slowly come alive. My heart beat fast and steady like a drum. Today was the day. 7 years of smiling through insults, sitting silent at family dinners, letting Margaret control the narrative. That ended tonight. Daniel was still asleep. He looked peaceful, like a man who didn't know his mother had invited his future wife to our anniversary party, or that his own wife was about to become the new owner of his family's company. I wondered how he'd react to either truth. Rachel picked me up around noon. She didn't say anything at first, just handed me a paper bag with a breakfast sandwich and my favorite iced matcha. "You okay?" she asked once we were on the highway. I nodded. "As okay as you can be when you're about to detonate your entire life." She glanced at me, a small smile tugging at her lips. "No one lights a fire like you do, Jen." We drove straight to the law office. Eugene, our attorney, met us in his usual pressed suit, glasses fogged from the humidity. "Everything's in place," he said, motioning toward the long conference table already set with paperwork. "Final signatures, transfer notifications, new board formation, all ready to go." Rachel leaned against the table, scrolling through her tablet. "The press release is written. We hold it until the moment you're announced at the party, or until Margaret tries to make her move, whichever comes first." I walked around the table, fingertips brushing over the paper edges. Each one was a nail in the coffin of Margaret's control. "Let's get it done," I said. We signed everything. Quiet, steady, like we were loading weapons. Afterward, Rachel and I stopped by the company's downtown headquarters. It was strange walking in knowing I technically owned the place now, though no one else did yet. Well, no one but Eugene and Max. Max was Daniel's uncle and the company's CFO. He'd always been different. Blunt, practical, quietly observant. He never treated me the way the others did. He found us in the executive wing, sipping from a mug that said, "Don't ask me for anything." "You're early," he said, raising an eyebrow. "The party doesn't start for another 6 hours." "Wanted to check in," I said, "about the board meeting." He gave a short laugh. "That's already off the rails. Your mother-in-law moved it up to this morning. Said it was urgent restructuring." "What kind of restructuring?" Max's expression darkened. "New bylaws, transferring key shares into a private trust, proposed changes that would reduce your husband's stake. All under the radar." Rachel swore under her breath. "She's scrambling," I said. "She knows something's up." Max nodded. "She's not stupid, just arrogant and used to winning." "Is Daniel in the loop?" Max hesitated. "Not really. He sat through the meeting, but I think he's just trying to keep the peace. Or maybe he doesn't want to believe what she's doing." I rubbed my temples. "He needs to decide where he stands. Soon." "Let me know when you want to make your move," Max said. I'm ready. We left the building quietly. As we stepped out into the street, my phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Looking forward to seeing you tonight. I trust you'll wear something appropriate for the occasion. No signature, no emoji, just pure control disguised as manners. Rachel glanced at it and snorted. She really thinks this is her show. Let her, I said, slipping my phone into my bag. Tonight she finds out who really owns the stage. The venue was exactly what you'd expect for a Willis family event. Ornate chandeliers, white roses, a live quartet playing just outside the ballroom. Waiters in tuxedos, guests in gowns, and press photographers quietly lining the outer wall like they weren't supposed to be there. I arrived 20 minutes early wearing a sleek black dress and heels sharp enough to stab. Daniel wasn't there yet. Margaret, of course, was. She stood at the ballroom entrance like she owned the world, sipping from a flute of champagne and pointing out final adjustments to the staff. When she saw me, she didn't smile. She gave that little nod she used when she wanted to seem gracious without offering actual kindness. "Jennifer," she said, "glad to see you dressed for the occasion." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. She didn't respond, just turned and walked off. That was her way. The ballroom filled fast. Friends, clients, relatives, business partners. I saw Max chatting with the COO near the bar. Rachel was already in the crowd, quiet but alert. And then right on cue, Margaret took the mic. "Good evening, everyone," she said, voice smooth and polished like a news anchor. "Thank you for joining us tonight as we celebrate 7 wonderful years of marriage between my son Daniel and his lovely wife Jennifer." Applause, forced smiles, my heart beat steady. "But tonight is more than just a celebration," she continued. "It's a transition, a time to look forward, to plan for the future of our family and our company." I saw Daniel step into the ballroom confused. He hadn't heard the speech start. He was already too late. And with that in mind, Margaret said, "I'd like to welcome someone very special to the stage. Please join me in greeting Chelsea Hart." My stomach twisted. Chelsea walked in from the far door, tall poised, dressed like a political wife. I remembered her vaguely from a charity gala years ago. Harvard Law, daughter of some senator, the woman Margaret had once described as a real fit for the Willis name. Margaret beamed as Chelsea stepped forward, taking the mic. "Thank you, Mrs. Willis. I'm honored to be here and excited for the future." Daniel looked at them both, his mouth slightly open. "What's going on?" he whispered to me. I didn't answer. I just walked up the stairs to the stage. Margaret's smile froze. "Actually," I said, gently taking the microphone from Chelsea, "I have an announcement too." The room fell completely silent, effective as of 10:00 a.m. "This morning," I continued, "I am now the majority shareholder of Willis Enterprises." Gasps, murmurs. Margaret's hand tightened around her champagne flute. "What are you talking about?" she said too quietly for anyone else to hear. I didn't flinch. "Your company, your empire, your name, it all belongs to me now." Max stepped up beside me. "She's telling the truth. I verified the documents myself." Margaret's face turned white. Daniel just stared. "And since this is a celebration of marriage," I said, turning back to the crowd, "I thought it was time I showed what partnership really looks like." I pulled out my phone, connected it to the projection screen. The room lit up with our company's new branding, our mission, our values. Not Margaret's empire, mine. People clapped. Slowly at first, then louder. Rachel caught my eye from the crowd, nodding once. Daniel looked like he wanted to say something. He stepped forward, reaching for the mic. "Jennifer, you did all this without telling me." I held his gaze. "I wanted you to choose me because you believed in me, not because you had no other option. And now I'm not asking for permission." It felt like a battlefield. Daniel stood in the center of it, stunned. Margaret was pale and stiff beside him, her champagne flute trembling slightly. The guests didn't know what to do. Some clapped, some whispered, some just watched with wide eyes like they'd wandered into a live soap opera. I stood on stage, steady the microphone in my hand, and years of silence finally behind me. Daniel took a step forward. "You bought the company?" he asked again, voice low, disbelieving. "I built a tech firm," I said. "I spent the last 3 years developing software that revolutionized energy efficiency. When your family started looking to sell off divisions, my company made an offer through a third party." He blinked. "Why not tell me?" I could feel every pair of eyes in the room on us. I almost didn't care. "Because you never looked," I said quietly. "Not at me, not at what I was doing. Every time your mother minimized me, you looked away. I learned not to ask for space. I took it instead." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Margaret tried to speak. "This is a mistake. This is emotional sabotage. You've stolen my family's legacy." "No," I interrupted, turning to her. "I rescued it. You were gutting it from the inside, transferring power to a trust under Chelsea's name, cutting your own son out. You don't get to call that legacy. The room stirred. Reporters were already whispering into their phones, probably live tweeting every word. Max stood to the side, arms folded, stone-faced. Rachel caught my eye from the back of the room and gave me a slight nod, calm, proud. Margaret, now trembling, turned to Daniel. "Tell her to stop. Tell her she doesn't have the right." He didn't move, just stared at the floor, then at me. "She's my wife," he said quietly. "She's earned more than any of us ever gave her credit for." Margaret's breath caught in her throat. For the first time in the 10 years I'd known her, she looked genuinely unsure. A woman used to dictating every step was watching her entire game board flip upside down. "I'm not here for revenge," I told the crowd, letting my voice carry. "I'm here for change." Tonight, Willis Enterprises becomes something new. Transparent, inclusive, forward-thinking. Not just for those born into the boardroom, but for those who build it. Silence stretched across the marble floor like fog, then applause. Slow, scattered, but real. Margaret turned and left the ballroom without another word. Chelsea followed, head down. They didn't speak, didn't try to salvage the moment. They knew it was over. Daniel stayed. I walked off the stage, my heart still pounding. He met me halfway. "I didn't see it," he said softly. "Everything you've done, I didn't see any of it. I stopped waiting for you to," I said. "But I never stopped hoping." He looked down, then back at me. "Does this mean we're done?" "That depends," I said. "Are you ready to stop being your mother's son and start being your own man?" His face changed. Not all at once, but something in it relaxed, dropped away. The old loyalties, the weight of that name. Maybe it was the moment he finally let go. "I am now," he said. I nodded once, then no. "We're not done." Behind us, Rachel raised a glass and smirked. "To the new queen of the castle." The next morning, the headlines hit like a storm. Daughter-in-law takes over Willis Enterprises in surprise acquisition. Jennifer Moore, from housewife to tech mogul overnight. Corporate matriarch, outplayed by her own family. The phones at the office didn't stop ringing. Reporters, investors, board members, clients, everyone wanted a comment, a quote, an explanation. I gave none. I went to work. Max and I held an emergency board meeting at noon. Those who stayed were on board with the new vision. Those who weren't, we let go with generous severance packages and clean exits. Margaret's seat sat empty. I didn't remove it. I wanted the symbol of what came before. We began restructuring immediately. Department heads were reshuffled. New leaders were brought in, people who were competent, driven, and often overlooked by the old regime. People like Camilla from logistics, who'd been buried in middle management for years. Like Marcus in analytics, who'd submitted 6 innovation proposals and never got a single reply. I read every one, and we made space for more. More women, more young voices, more balance. Not just a new company, but a new culture. 2 weeks later, I sat in my new office, which used to be Margaret's. The view was the same, but the furniture was lighter, simpler. Clean lines, less marble, more air. Daniel walked in holding 2 coffees. "Thought you could use this." I accepted it, smiling faintly. "You brought peace offerings now. Every day if I have to." He sat across from me, quiet. "Then she called me this morning. Let me guess, lawsuit threats, you've been brainwashed." He shook his head. "No," she said. "I underestimated her." I blinked. "That's the closest thing to an apology I'll ever get." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught, but he opened it not with drama, just quiet intent. It was my wedding ring. The one I took off the night I signed the acquisition papers. "I'd like to start over," he said. "No strings, no family empires, just us." I looked at him for a long time. Not at the man I married, but the one he was becoming. "I'll think about it," I said. He smiled. "Fair." The office buzzed with new energy. People smiled more. Meetings ended with ideas instead of dead weight. The cafeteria now had daycare info posted on the wall, and the executive floor didn't feel like a fortress anymore. Rachel came by later that week holding a thick binder. "Press conference is scheduled. You ready to own your story?" I opened the binder. Media talking points, public-facing strategy, the works. Then I looked out the window. "No," I said, "we're not doing a press conference." Rachel blinked. We're doing a town hall. All employees, all floors. Let the media watch from the back. We tell our people first, then the world." She grinned. "That's very you." We stood together looking out over the city. "Feels different now," I said. "Not just the company, everything." "You built this," she said, "from the basement up." I nodded. "Now let's build something bigger." A month later, we broke ground on the East Campus, the company's new innovation hub. It had space for labs, workshops, and an employee wellness center. The childcare facility was Margaret's suggestion. Stronger locks on all exits, she'd said during a meeting, flipping through the blueprints. And better lighting in the parking lot. Safety first. People had questions about her being there. I had questions too, but we'd made a deal. She took the consulting role quietly. No public return, no title. Just her advice when it helped and her silence when it didn't. We weren't friends, but we weren't enemies either. Sometimes that's the best you get with family. At the grand opening, Daniel stood beside me on stage. "We've made mistakes," he said, voice steady, "but we're building something new, something our children might one day be proud of." People clapped. I stepped up next. "I didn't take this company," I told them. "I took responsibility. And now every person here gets a seat at the table." That night, Margaret sent me a one-line email. "You turned it into something better than I ever imagined." That was the last time she wrote me. I didn't reply. Some stories end quietly. Months passed. The company grew. So did I. I never became the woman Margaret wanted for her son. I became something else entirely. A woman who knew her value, who didn't need a legacy to stand tall. She made her own. In the end, I didn't burn it all down. I planted something better in its place. And that was more satisfying than revenge ever could be. Story 3. I'm Elena Ross, and I used to believe that hard work and loyalty were all it took to earn respect, especially from family. I learned the hard way that when it comes to business, even blood can be a liability. For a decade, I gave everything I had to my family's company, Ross Tech. We started as a tiny repair shop tucked into a worn-out strip mall in Denver. My father, Douglas, opened it 2 decades ago. It was never much, but it was his pride. I was always the quiet one. While my younger sister, Brooke, was off acing classes at some top-tier business school in Chicago, I stayed close to home. I worked part-time in the shop while getting my computer science degree from a local university. Brooke was polished, eloquent, textbook brilliant. Dad adored her, made no effort to hide it. Me. I just put my head down and got to work. During my senior year of college, I created a basic inventory software to help us manage repairs and parts. Nothing fancy, just something simple that worked. We tested it at our shop and shared it with a few neighboring businesses. Word spread faster than I expected. Small companies started buying licenses. Within a few months, the demand was higher than we could handle. Dad came around eventually. "I think you're onto something here," he said one evening. I can still hear the pride in his voice. "Real proud of you, kiddo." That small moment meant everything to me. In hindsight, it was probably the last time I truly felt like I mattered to him. After I graduated, I went all in. We rebranded. I rewrote the software, expanded its features, and built out a client portal. Within 2 years, our repair shop was gone, replaced by a modest software company serving over 200 clients. I worked 7 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day. Sometimes I slept at the office. It wasn't just ambition. I was trying to build something permanent, something ours. Brooke returned 5 years later. She had just left a high-paying position at a major consultancy firm in New York. At dinner one night over grilled chicken and awkward small talk, she said, "I think I'm ready to come home and help lead Ross Tech into the future." I stared at her fork halfway to my mouth. Dad didn't hesitate. "That's fantastic, sweetheart." And just like that, she was in. He handed her the title of co-CEO within a month. No transition plan, no conversation, just a press release and new business cards. Her role, branding and growth. Mine, development and operations, the back end. I was stunned, and if I'm honest, embarrassed. I tried not to take it personally. Maybe Brooke really wanted to contribute. Maybe it would be good for the company. I buried the frustration and focused on the work. Brooke, on the other hand, focused on appearances. She revamped our image, redesigned the website, launched ad campaigns, and hit the conference circuit. Suddenly, she was giving interviews on tech innovation, accepting awards, and getting featured on business blogs as if the company had just magically appeared. Meanwhile, I was still at my desk at 10 p.m. debugging code. The company grew. A lot. We went from $10 million in annual revenue to over $50 million in 5 years. But with each milestone, I faded a little more into the background. Then came Dad's 60th birthday. Brooke organized the entire thing, rented out a ballroom, invited half the city, and turned it into a press event disguised as a party. I wasn't surprised. That was her style. She never did anything unless there was a stage and an audience. I showed up early like always and helped set up the welcome tables. I wore a simple navy dress, nothing flashy, When Brooke saw me, she barely disguised her annoyance. "You couldn't have tried a little harder with your look," she whispered. "These are big people, Elena." I didn't respond. I just went back to arranging name tags. That night, over a perfectly plated steak dinner, Brooke stood and clinked her glass. "I'd like to make an announcement," she said, smiling at the crowd. "As Rostech moves forward into its next era, the board has made a unanimous decision about our leadership." My heart stopped. There had been no board meetings, not that I was invited to. Effective immediately, she continued, "I will be stepping into the role of sole CEO." I didn't understand. Brooke's voice kept going, all confident and rehearsed. She talked about streamlining vision, modern leadership, and how some parts of the company needed to evolve. Then she turned to me. "Elena's done an okay job maintaining our legacy tech," she said with a faux sympathetic smile, "but it's time we modernized our leadership. The truth is, not everyone is cut out to lead in today's business world." There it was. In front of our clients, our partners, and our own mother, my sister publicly dismissed me. I looked at Dad, praying he'd step in. He didn't. He just nodded, beaming with pride like she had just won an Olympic medal. I stood up, walked to their table, took a small gift box out of my bag and placed it in front of him. "Happy birthday, Dad." Then I turned and left. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by files and patents with my name on them. And that's when I realized I still had control. Not just metaphorically, legally. Dad had sold me a chunk of his shares 3 years ago when we needed capital. Brooke never noticed. Neither did he, apparently. I owned 51% of Rostech. The next morning, I showed up at the office before anyone else. I brewed a pot of coffee, logged into the system, and started sending emails. By 9 a.m., I had already sent formal contract termination notices to our biggest clients and updated InnovateWare's licensing agreement, the software powering most of Rostech's services. Because what Brooke didn't realize was that I had registered the software under a different company, my own. Rostech only held a renewable licensing agreement, an agreement that expired conveniently at 9:00 a.m. that day. Brooke and Dad walked in smug as ever. Elena, Brooke said coolly, "I didn't expect to see you here. Thought you'd do the mature thing and walk away." "I thought I'd handle some last details," I replied, motioning toward the conference screen. "There's something we need to go over." Dad frowned. "There's nothing to discuss. The board already approved." "Let's talk about the board," I said, pulling up the shareholder ledger. Brooke's eyes widened. "You own 51%, she said, voice shaky. "Yes," I said calmly. "Dad signed the transfer himself 3 years ago during your awards week. He didn't read the agreement." She turned to him. "Is that true?" He looked pale. "Elena," he started, "that wasn't..." And that's not all. I cut in. "The licensing agreement for our core platform expired this morning. The IP belongs to InnovateWare LLC. That's my company. Rostech no longer has access." Their expressions fell in unison. I clicked to the next screen, client emails confirming contract withdrawals, developers resigning key accounts, opting to follow me to InnovateWare. "You have 2 choices," I said. Option 1. I leave, take my software staff and clients. Rostech collapses. Option 2. You both step down. I take over. They sat in silence. Brooke looked like someone had pulled the floor from beneath her. "You planned this." "No," I said. I reacted. 12 hours ago, you called me worthless in front of the people I helped bring into this business. I just finally decided to stop letting you define my value." By noon, they'd signed the paperwork. I took control of Rostech. Fully. The company survived. Actually, it thrived. But the family, that's harder to rebuild. My mother came to my office that night, red-eyed. "Did it have to happen like this?" she asked quietly. I looked at her, heart heavy but resolute. "They gave me no choice." The day I took control of Rostech, everything changed, but not all at once. On the surface, things looked the same. Same office, same staff, same parking lot, with the crack running through the third space from the door. But beneath it all, the balance of power had shifted, and everyone knew it. I moved into the CEO office the next morning. The nameplate on the door still said Brooke Ross, but I left it there for a while. Not out of sentiment, just convenience. I had more urgent things to deal with. My first week was chaos. Over a dozen developers from InnovateWare officially signed over to Rostech. Legal scrambled to draft updated contracts, and HR worked overtime onboarding them. Most of our core clients, those who'd built relationships with me personally, renewed their contracts, some even expanding them. The rest, they followed Brooke's version of the company out the door. Couldn't blame them. She had charm polish and a gift for selling an idea. What she didn't have was the infrastructure, the code, or the trust. And in tech, that's what keeps people around. Brooke left quietly. No press release, no public statement, Just a quick email to staff saying she was pursuing new opportunities. I later heard she moved to the Bay Area, got a marketing role at a promising startup. Fitting, I guess. She was always better at beginnings than building. Dad, on the other hand, stayed silent for days. He didn't resign immediately. Instead, he'd come into the office like a ghost, hovering around meetings he wasn't part of, watching me from the glass walls of the boardroom as if trying to understand what had just happened. Eventually, he stepped down too. He did it on a Thursday, walked into my office and placed a folded letter on my desk. No eye contact, no speech, just turned and walked out. I read it that night. It was short. A few lines about regret, a few more about pride he'd been too stubborn to show. I folded it back up and placed it in the drawer beside the old birthday gift I never gave him. That drawer, it turns out, became a kind of graveyard for apologies that came too late. The hardest part wasn't running the company. That was second nature by now. The hard part was the silence that followed. No more family dinners, no more group texts, no more, "Hey, what do you think of this?" messages from Brooke. It felt like exile. People don't talk enough about that part, how success can make you lonelier than failure ever did. When you lose, at least people feel bad for you. When you win, they call you cold, calculating, ruthless. I wasn't any of those things. I was just tired of being erased. The turning point came 6 weeks later. I was sitting with our head of product, Angie, reviewing wireframes for a new client dashboard when she said, "You're doing it, you know." Doing what? Running this place, leading it, and not just holding it together. You've got people excited again. I looked at her, half smiling. "You say that like you didn't believe I could." She hesitated. "Honestly, a year ago I wasn't sure. You were always in the background. Brooke was the one who made the noise." I didn't take offense, she was right. But now she added, "You don't need noise. You've got momentum." That week I called an all-hands meeting. First time since the shift. Everyone showed up, most of them probably wondering if I'd launch into a mission statement or pitch some new grand strategy. Instead, I told them the truth. "I'm not here to make a big speech," I began. "You all know what happened. You've seen the articles, the LinkedIn posts, the rumors. Some of them are true, some of them aren't. What matters is that we're still here." I paused. I didn't build Rostech alone, but I did build the foundation, and I plan to keep building. Smarter, cleaner, more honestly. Then I looked around the room. If you're here for that, I'm glad. If you're not, I get it. That was all. No applause, just quiet nods. But that's how trust starts. Not with fireworks, just someone choosing to stay when they didn't have to. 3 months in, we launched 2 new software products, an AI-based route optimizer for travel companies, and a client-side security tool for remote networks. Both were things I had shelved during Brooke's tenure because she didn't see the brand value. They were hits. Within 6 months, we were back to pre-fall numbers. By the 9th month, we surpassed them. I brought Mom on as a part-time consultant. She'd always been the quiet backbone of our family. I think she wanted to stay neutral, but after that night at the birthday party, something in her shifted. She started sending me articles about women CEOs and quiet leadership. Sometimes she'd just drop off lunch with a sticky note that said, "You're doing great," even if they never said it. One afternoon, I received a message on LinkedIn. "Brooke, congratulations on the new launch. I saw the Tech Daily piece. Very cool. You always were better at the hard parts. Hope things are going well." I stared at it for a while. Didn't respond. Not because I was angry, I just didn't know what to say. Some gaps don't close with words. A year after everything went down, I got invited to speak at a business conference. Topic: leading through undervaluation. I stood on stage in a navy suit looking out at a room full of founders, investors, and students scribbling in notebooks. And I told them everything. About starting in a strip mall. About being overlooked. About being called adequate by my own sister. About how I took it all back, not through revenge, but by reminding people what I had built. "You don't have to raise your voice to raise a company," I said near the end. "Sometimes your presence is enough. Sometimes your work is the loudest thing in the room." The room was silent. Then someone in the back stood and clapped. The rest followed. When I got home that night, I poured a glass of wine and opened the drawer, the one with Dad's letter and the unopened gift box. I took out the box. Inside was a leather-bound photo album. I had designed it myself back when I thought Dad might actually want to see the journey from our first tiny shop to our first software license to our first office expansion. Each page had a caption. Each milestone had a date. I never gave it to him. Still haven't. But I looked through it again that night, not out of bitterness, just to remind myself that even if they don't remember, I do. The year after I took back Rostech felt like stepping out of a long storm. At first, everything moved fast. product rollouts, client renewals, system rebuilds. But once the dust settled, something deeper happened. I began to breathe differently. I stopped feeling like I had to prove I belonged in the room. I was the room now. I shaped the direction. I made the calls. And more than anything, I did it with the kind of clarity that only comes after surviving betrayal by people you once trusted the most. But clarity isn't comfort. That came later. The holidays came and went. No invites from my father, no word from Brooke. My mother, to her credit, tried. She hosted a small dinner around New Year's and asked me quietly if I'd be okay seeing them. I said yes, but I made no promises about small talk. They showed up. Brooke looked tired, older somehow, like the months had aged her more than a few years. Dad looked uncomfortable, like someone sitting in a chair they no longer had a right to occupy. He barely looked me in the eye. Brooke gave me a nod, almost grateful I wasn't making a scene. It was civil, shallow, nothing like the warmth people expect from family. But maybe that expectation had always been a myth. We sat, ate, traded surface-level updates, and then we left. That was it. I didn't cry, didn't rage, I didn't feel much of anything. That's the thing about getting burned by the people closest to you. The fire doesn't leave you angry forever. Eventually, it just makes you immune to their heat. Meanwhile, Rostec evolved. We doubled our development team, partnered with a startup in Munich to integrate adaptive language processing into our enterprise suite. By the third quarter, our revenue crossed $120 million. But more than the numbers, I noticed the shift in culture. Employees stopped knocking before entering my office, not out of disrespect, but comfort, trust. I started mentoring new hires personally once a week. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to create the kind of leadership I never had. I told them, you don't have to shout to lead. You just need to listen, think, and build. Somewhere along the way, people stopped calling me technical co-founder and started calling me what I'd always been, the CEO. Then came the university invitation, Brooke's alma mater. They wanted me to give a keynote speech at their business school's graduation ceremony. The theme, Hidden Strength Leadership from the Shadows. I laughed when I read it. The irony was thick, but something about it felt right. I accepted. When the day came, I stood at the podium facing hundreds of wide-eyed graduates, parents, and professors. I could see Brooke in the second row, invited by the school as a former student. She looked surprised to see me there. I started with this. I was once told I was too quiet to lead, that I lacked vision, that I belonged in the background. But it turns out you don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. You just need to be the one who builds the room in the first place. A few students chuckled, most leaned in. Leadership isn't about applause, it's about accountability. It's about showing up when no one's watching. And sometimes it's about standing your ground when even your family wants you to disappear. I didn't look at Brooke, I didn't need to. The truth hung in the air on its own. After the speech, a line of students waited to talk. Some thanked me, others asked about internships. One girl, maybe 21, said, I never thought someone like me could lead. I don't like speaking up in groups. I smiled and told her the truth. Neither did I, until I had to. Back at Rostec, the momentum continued. One of our newer products, a customizable client interface tool, went viral in the enterprise community. Reviews called it unreasonably intuitive. Investors reached out. I politely declined most of them. I wasn't building to sell. I was building to last. By fall, I had promoted Angie to COO. She had earned it. She was sharp, no nonsense, and she didn't sugarcoat things. The kind of leader every company needs, but few know how to support. We started planning international expansion. Quietly, steadily, just the way I liked it. One day, Brooke showed up at the office. No warning. Security called up. I told them to let her in. She looked nervous, holding a manila envelope and wearing the same beige trench coat she used to wear when we were kids on rainy days. I won't stay long, she said, standing in the doorway. I motioned for her to sit. We didn't talk for a minute. Then she handed me the envelope. It's a proposal, she said. A software branding firm I've been helping build. We'd like to license one of your tools. I opened it, skimmed. It's good work, I said. You know what you're doing? I've learned a lot since, I looked up. Since you tried to erase me from my own company, I asked. She looked down. Yeah, that. Silence again. Then she said something I never expected. I was jealous, not of the company, of how sure you were. I spent my life chasing approval. You just did the work. I didn't say anything right away. Then I said I was never sure, Brooke. I just didn't have the option to fail. She nodded, wiping the corner of her eye. I'm sorry, she whispered. It wasn't dramatic, no tears, no long hug, just human. I signed the proposal. Let's do business, I said, but that's all it'll be for now. I understand. After she left, I walked to the window. Same skyline, same office. But something had shifted again this time inside me. I realized that revenge had never really been my goal. What I wanted was respect, peace, a place where my work could speak louder than their doubts. And now I had that. A few months later, Dad sent a letter. No request, no business, just a few lines. I watched you from the sidelines. I was wrong to trust noise over substance. You built this, and I'm proud of you even if I didn't say it when it mattered. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, just because I didn't need his validation anymore. Today, Rostech is valued at just over $400 million. Funny how things change. The girl they called technical support now leads one of the most trusted B2B software firms in the country. But more than the title or the numbers I carry, something heavier and worth far more. Self-trust. My story gets used in classrooms now. I get invited to panels. I mentor young women in STEM who were told they were too quiet or too soft. They're not. They just haven't had their moment yet. I still keep that unopened birthday gift in my office drawer. The photo album, from the beginning to where we are now. Maybe one day I'll give it to Dad. Or maybe I won't. Some things are better left unopened. But the story it holds, that's already been told in every line of code, in every contract, signed in every person who ever doubted me and had to watch me rise anyway. I didn't build Rostech to prove anyone wrong. I built it to prove myself right. And that has always been enough.